In 1949, the Communists won the Civil War against the Nationalists and formed the People's Republic of China. The U.S. recognized the non-communist government in Taiwan as China's official government. The People's Republic of China called the U.S. imperialist and the common enemy of people throughout the world. The U.S. formed an embargo and travel restrictions after the Korean War, as well as sending military aid to Taiwan, making it nearly impossible for unification of China. The People's Republic of China called Nixon a gangster who wielded a blood-dripping butcher's knife, furthering tensions between the two countries. They called him this because he was the head of the House Un-American Activities Committee. Early in Nixon's presidency, he asked the U.S. ambassador to Poland to approach the People's Republic of China and notify them that the U.S. was interested in talking to them. In 1969, Nixon communicated with the People's Republic of China through the President of Pakistan, further lessening the tensions between the two countries. One reason China decided to invite the U.S. to play was because they wanted hostile neighbors to think that there would be a shift in alliances. It came as a surprise to the U.S. that Nixon wanted to open connections with China because he blamed them for all the problems in Indochina, one of them being the Korean War. Nixon wanted to reopen connections with China because he thought that if China were ignored, it would nurture its fantasies, cherish its hates, and threaten its neighbors. Because of this, Nixon thought it was unrealistic and unwise to ignore China.
The United States ping-pong team was in Japan in 1971 when they received an invitation from China. China had invited them to their country to play against them. This was a monumental step for the relations between the U.S. and China, for the team was the first sports delegation to visit the Chinese capital since 1949. Communism had proven to be a constant barrier between the two countries. This visit brought new hope and foreshadowed better relations between the U.S. and China. Time magazine called it the ping herd around the world, as the 9 American ping pong players, judges, spouses, and journalists arrived in China on April 10, 1971. China showed its efforts in relieving tensions with the U.S. in their motto, "Friendship first, competition second." This friendliness was further proven by Chinese player Wayne Zidane. After American player Glenn Cohen missed the bus after practice, Zidane offered him a ride. From April 11th to April 17th, the two teams played exhibition matches. Although the Chinese had a far superior team, they were friendly with the U.S. players and did not play to win. Besides playing ping pong, the American team had an opportunity to visit Chinese landmarks like Summer Palace, the Great Wall, and the Great Hall of People. Although many Americans were unsure of the visit, they began to accept the idea of a friendship between the Chinese and the U.S. Things only seemed to get better due to the games. On April 14, 1971, the U.S. government lifted a trade embargo with China that had lasted for over 20 years. Eventually, Communist leader Mao Zedong and American President Richard Nixon met in February 1972. Nixon became the first U.S. president to ever visit China. This led to Wayne Zidane, head of Chinese table tennis delegation, to visit the U.S. 2 months later. While the two governments still had much to work on, this was a big step for both nations. Both the American and Chinese public became optimistic about the future. It would seem that the effects of the ping-pong diplomacy were everlasting and cooperation was acquired.
The détente attempted to ease the strained relations between the U.S. and China throughout the 1970s. As stated earlier, sending American ping-pong players to China in order to achieve this détente gave President Nixon an opening to travel there. This enabled him to be the first U.S. president to visit China. A year prior to his visit, Nixon's national security advisor, Henry Kissinger, secretly visited Beijing and set the foundation for Nixon's visit to China. For a week, starting February 21, 1972, Nixon traveled to Beijing, Hangzhou, and Shanghai. Upon his arrival, he was summoned to a meeting with Chairman Mao Zedong of China. To start off the meeting, Chairman Mao Zedong told Nixon, "Our common old friend, Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek, doesn't approve of this." The U.S. had previously sided with Chiang Kai-shek, at the time exiled in Taiwan, in a civil war against Mao. Nixon's visit marked a change in thinking, as the U.S. planned to let the Chinese settle the Taiwan dispute themselves. This just further proved the emphasis on compromise and friendly relations. Nixon also had several meetings with the Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai during his trip. These meetings included Nixon's additional pledges to remove U.S. military forces from Taiwan and the Shanghai Communique. The U.S. and PRC governments issued the Shanghai Communique, in which both the U.S. and the PRC promised to work toward the complete stabilization of diplomatic relations. Nixon's visit to China and the U.S.'s work for amity resulted in the U.S.'s acknowledgement of the belief that all Chinese on both sides of the Taiwan Strait uphold that there is only one China. This allowed them to open trade and other contacts. Although the U.S. continued to maintain official relations with the Republic of China's government in Taiwan, tensions had vastly improved due to the détente. In 1979, the U.S. cut off any relations having to do with Taiwan, as they established full diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China. And although the U.S. and China were working together extremely well, America faced another time of deep distress during the Vietnam War.